Welcome to Greensboro Viewmaster Crowdsourced TV, where we focus on the inner life of Greensboro. Sponsored by CRESCENT Productions, your pro resource for multi-camera live stream events. And by Artisan Advertising and Video, your a la carte advertising agency and video production house. Also sponsored by Film Machine, Highway 29 Motion Pictures, Fellow Travelers, Trep TV, and First Light Films.
Welcome to Greensboro Viewmaster. Just drinking my coffee. Thank you for joining us. I'm here with Billy Ingram today. We've got some really interesting folks, some really good folks to talk to. Billy and I go back
30 years.
30 years. I've worked with him initially as an art director,
Right.
in advertising,
Right.
and then as an actor,
Yep.
and many times as an actor. And I guess it's fair to say that, well, let's talk about your writing, okay? Because to me, it's been 4 years that you've just really become more of a voice in some of the local newspapers and the O. Henry.
Yeah. I think it's been about 3 years now. I decided I was going to write about Greensboro, and I was lucky to fall in with O. Henry magazine. They liked what I was doing, and I was also lucky to work for Yes Weekly. So I'm working on some stories for both O. Henry and Yes Weekly, and everything I write now is about Greensboro mostly.
Yeah. So you're a great person to have here. Because we're sitting on the patio at Cheesecakes by Alex in downtown Greensboro on Elm, and I didn't know this when I first talked to Alex about doing this live stream here, but Billy informed me that this is a historic site.
Yes, this building just to our left that Cheesecakes by Alex started in was the Princess Cafe in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and it was really the elite place to eat, where the city leaders would meet and have breakfast and lunch, dinner. They actually butchered their own meat here. And it's one of the great restaurants in Greensboro's history.
And I'm going to bring up a picture, if I can, of the National Theater.
The funny thing about the Princess, it was one of 75 restaurants in downtown Greensboro alone. And almost every single one of them were owned by Greek immigrants. I never went to the National myself. I know you told me you did, but the National Theater was built back in 1927, at the same time that the Carolina Theater was built. And it was just as opulent, just as beautiful as the Carolina Theater. And all the great acts would come and play the National. Elvis played here in 1956. He drove up to the gig in his 1955 pink Cadillac Eldorado, or Fleetwood it was. I believe it was a convertible as well. It was his first car that he bought with the money that he was getting, because his first hit single, I believe Hound Dog, was racing up the charts as he was playing here. So right next door to us, where this parking lot is, between the Guilford building and Cheesecakes, is where the National Theater was. And Elvis did 6 shows that day. He would do 4 matinees and then 2 shows at night. And then he went from here to High Point.
Holy cow.
He was in Burlington before he was here, touring with the Carter sisters. And that day, the old rebel and Pecos Pete, who, if you're over the age of 40 and grew up in Greensboro, you know who I'm talking about, they went backstage to meet the Carter sisters, and when they did, they came together with Elvis and Johnny Cash and the Carter sisters, so they were all there, having a good time for a while, and sort of like blows your mind to think of those great legends, locally and nationally, would be in one place.
Yeah, it really
But all
does.
the great acts toured. Lunton Fontaine came here, 2 great actors, and all the country acts played here, and very popular theater. And then in the 1960s, it fell into disrepair, and they would just show old movies. And that when you went there to see horror movies or something like that?
Yeah. I was just thinking, you and I are about the same age.
Yeah.
Maybe exactly the same age. We're both boomers.
Yep.
And I can remember as a child coming to downtown Greensboro, like at Christmas time in particular, and all the store windows were decorated.
Oh, man.
And there was a throng of people on the street.
Oh, yeah.
And it really wasn't until Natty Greens opened I was actually sitting on this very patio with my wife, and because we come downtown a lot, and we were sitting here, and people were just walking by on a Friday night, lots of people, and I was, Susan, something's going on downtown. What is it? And so I actually got up and I followed people to Natty Green's. It was right after they opened, and I realized then that craft brewing, all these brew pubs, we're going to make a huge. Natty Green's was making a huge difference that night, and now we have, I don't know how many brew pubs.
Well, even before Natty's, there was the Paisley Pineapple, and that was really popular in that building. That was originally California Sandwich Shop from the 1920s into the 1970s. So you had a half a century period where just one restaurant was, and there was a hotel above it. The floors above it were the hotel. So, yeah, that building has and it's because of California Sandwich Shop, and across the street was Jim's Lunch, and then there was another little diner across the street, and that's how they got the name Hamburger Square, because you could actually, they would compete to see who had the best hot dog. So why it was named Hamburger Square, I don't know, but just because you could get a hamburger and a Coke.
Well, it's fair to say that we're interested in Greensboro's history, and I hope a lot of people are, because Greensboro Viewmaster is going to continue to pay attention to Greensboro's history. I think it's where and how we sort of find some roots to who we are as a city and as a citizenry that lives here and shares this space and shares this history. And so it's only fitting that we would have Billy Ingram with us today, because he has not only educated himself and stayed in touch with Greensboro's history, excuse me, but he has written a book about it. And I have the book right here, Hamburger Square. Chuck?
Hamburger Squared.
Do you have a camera on this?
Is there a glare?
Okay.
Yes, it's called Hamburger Squared. It's almost impossible to find, because if you ask for it, Hamburger Squared, you won't find it, because I'm using the mathematical 2, the little 2, to represent squared. So look for Hamburger 2.
We talked earlier, Billy and I did, about doing a special about Hamburger Square, on the history of it, and just how it got that name. And there happens to be a new brew pub, Little Brother Brewing, that's opening on Hamburger Square. So we're going to try to hook up with them and do something from Hamburger Square in a week or two, and look into more detail into Hamburger Square.
And that was the location where Jim's Lunch was. And Jim's Lunch, when you would walk inside, there'd be chickens hanging all around the ceiling, ready to be fried, I guess, all plucked, ready to go.
Mother likes to tell the story of her father, John Henry Moore, who worked at Sands and Company at the train station, at the depot.
Oh, right.
It's a railroad. Sands was a railroad supplier store.
Right.
But they also cut meat and had cheese and other veggies and stuff, I guess. And they made hot dogs. And she would tell this story about her father lining up the hot dogs on his arm.
Right.
You know, like,
right.
I don't know how many.
And then putting the condiments on.
Yeah, the whole bit.
Yeah,
so.
Wow, that's a lost art.
So Hamburger Square 2, it's on Amazon. You should check it out. You should buy a copy, because what you're doing is you're supporting Billy and the city, so to speak. You're learning about the city in a way that only someone who's investigated it and taken the time to put it in writing, a story that only he can tell.
It's a lot of short stories, lots of snippets about different aspects of Greensboro history. The great fires that we had, Elvis's connection to Greensboro, which was considerable. This 300 block right across the street, I wrote extensively about that, the history of that entire block. Very, very interesting block, very eclectic. This was Furniture Row right here, the 300 block of South Elm. There were furniture stores everywhere. If you were going to go buy furniture, you came down to the 300 block of South Elm.
And prior to that, back during the Civil War, there were a lot of cigar shops.
Yes, at the turn of the century, we produced more cigars than I think anybody else in the world, but certainly more cigars than anywhere else in the country.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but it was a huge business. And all the cigars were rolled by women, because they didn't want anybody stealing cigars. And of course, a woman's not going to smoke a cigar. It's ridiculous. And it's very interesting, the Guilford building next door, which is right on the corner, that started out as a hotel, as the King Cotton Hotel. It was the King Cotton Hotel for 2 weeks. They closed it down because all the noise from the trains, 100 trains a day coming into Greensboro, unloading cattle and everything you can imagine, and the smoke and the soot and the noise from those trains just drove people out of that hotel. So they built another King Cotton hotel a couple blocks away on Davie Street. And then this became a bank. And then we had the Great Depression and the bank went out of business in just a couple of months or something, very short period of time. And then it became a much more successful bank.
And you know, my first job when I came back from college in Greensboro was in that building.
Really?
For Bouvier Cecil Associates, the advertising agency.
Right.
It's where they had their office for a few months before they moved further south on Elm.
I understand it's the most technically advanced office space in downtown Greensboro. They've really gone in there and
this building?
Yes, and made it ship-shape as far as connectivity goes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's what I'm told. I'm going to be writing about it soon.
Billy also writes for the O. Henry.
O. Henry magazine, available wherever fine magazines are found.
Wherever there's a street corner in Greensboro.
That's where you'll find me.
So in the O. Henry, you go under the name.
Well,
Billy
I have a monthly column that I write called Wandering Billy, but then I also write feature articles.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought it was Billy I.
Well, I write the
That's your
monthly
byline.
column as under the nom de plume Billy I. I used to write a column in Los Angeles in the 1980s covering the punk rock scene as Billy I, and I said, well, can I use this, this pseudonym? Can I? They said, sure,
Okay, good. So you can check Billy out in the O. Henry. You
Yes
can check
Weekly.
out Hamburg. Yes Weekly.
Got a story coming up in just a couple of weeks.
Can you tell us about it, or is that?
Can't do that.
Can't do that.
Somebody will beat me to it.
And then you.
And also, I've got an investigation story that I'm doing. This is going to be the biggest story of the decade. If legally they can print it, it will be the biggest story of the decade.
Yeah, he hinted to me about this, but he wouldn't tell me what it was. So.
I'll tell you what it is right now.
Okay.
I discovered who set the Eastern Guilford High School fire in 2006, the fire that burned the school to the ground. And I found out who the two guys are, and the circumstances after that are jaw-dropping. I'll just put it that way. Absolutely jaw-dropping.
All right.
So stay tuned.
Well, that's a story that's close to me because my kids went to school at Eastern, and we spent a lot of time out there. And I remember going out after it burned and seeing what was left of it.
It was a mess.
It was a mess. And I also went to a play there after it was rebuilt. It was really rebuilt to a really nice looking school.
3 years. So those 3 years, those students they went to GTCC, they went to Western Guilford, they got spread out all over the place.
Yeah.
Kind of disrupted their high school life.
Yeah. So you heard it here first on Greensboro
That's right, you heard it
Viewmaster.
here first.
Billy's breaking some news for us. I didn't know he was going to do that, but I appreciate it.
I didn't either.
We're going to take a break here today. We have Taylor Ridge,
Taylor
the
Ridge.
actress, who is here with us, and the actress and model. We have Josh Sherrick, Arts and Events Superintendent for the City of Greensboro. And we have Adam Carlin, who is the director of the project space over at the Forge, if you're familiar with that building. And that's going to be fascinating to learn more about what's going on in the arts through that project. So stand by. We're going to go to just a quick changeover, and we'll be right back.